space that is crazy, that is chaotic, that is ever changing, that is completely unpredictable, where everybody has at least two jobs. No one is dedicated as just a leader. They're also working in the business at the same time. Those things tend to magnify it greatly in terms of the challenges. And that's where part of the problem, I think, has come from, is we've tried to sort of build different principles within the profession because of the chaos, and the principles aren't different. The application of those in veterinary medicine is very different. And what has to be front and center for people that are working with this content is how do you apply it and adapt it to this veterinary space? Because unless you've been in the veterinary space, unless you understand it intimately, unless you know that the front and the back often don't get along and feel like they're on different pages, unless you know how challenging communication is, unless you know what the talent and the workforce is like in the veterinary profession, how hard recruiting is, how difficult it is to create employee engagement. Unless you understand those things intimately, you can't necessarily apply the principles correctly. But the principles themselves don't shift. We teach the same thing to a multi-billion-dollar company when we're working with their leaders to help them lead change, create a strong culture, build engaged teams of people, that we do in the veterinary profession. It's just understanding the application in a way that lets us apply those principles in a pretty crazy and challenging environment on a daily basis. And not that some of those don't exist in other businesses, but they're probably extreme in the veterinary profession. And we also are working with groups of people that have often never been exposed to these concepts. And so they haven't really built a framework for how leadership happens. They've just done it the way they think they can squeeze it in based on the craziness of the day. And so that's sort of what's gotten us to this place where in some cases we have pretty stressful environments. We have pretty seriously disengaged teams of people, not because we intended on them, but because we've sort of found ourselves in this place where we're trying to lead at our best, but with really very little exposure to key principles or to the processes associated with it.
I definitely agree with the idea of, I mean, because it can go from 0 to 100 so quickly.
Right.
And when you're at 0, everyone says, yeah, let's make the culture better. Let's all kumbaya and get along. And then when you're at 100, everyone just starts getting short with each other and snapping, and it goes out the window. And
that's right.
And a couple of times I've tried to just kind of, obviously, when my patient is safe and they're not going to cause harm, but I've tried to just observe and wonder, like, that switch that gets flicked is definitely fight or flight, but it's also a priority list. Mm-hmm. And maybe that just ties into fight or flight. But if you ask someone, okay, why did you think it was okay to snap during that conversation? Or I ask myself that a lot.
Sure.
And the answer is, it didn't seem important. You know, the other person's feelings didn't seem important.
Right. Or seem less important, right? To your point. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it was more important for me to get the catheter in the patient than it was for me to worry whether or not I was going to offend someone when telling them to get off their bum and go get the catheter.
Right.
And so you talk a lot about the idea of, you know, going into our pre-evolved brain. But if you could just explain that a little bit more.
Sure, absolutely. And again, we sort of are able to apply these principles no matter what the business is. And to your point, what's very different in veterinary medicine is most other businesses don't deal with a hit by car, right? Or emergencies that are like, I mean, the medical profession in the human world obviously does to some degree, but it's different and it's managed differently and it presents itself differently often. So these concepts become even more important because we have to do them under stress that doesn't exist in a lot of other businesses. And we do see this, what you're describing. So when people get behind on their quarterly number in other businesses, right, they tighten up and they start to care less about people and more about activities that people are doing and less about how they're doing them or how well they're doing them or how they feel while they're doing, right? And so sometimes we hit the number and now we have a disengaged or a more disengaged group of people. And this can be the same thing. We saved the animal, but now we have a more disengaged group of people because how we did it sometimes causes people to walk away and think, wow, do I really want to work here? Do I really want to work with this group, with these people? So to your point, the things that happen in our brain, if we're human, they kind of happen to all of us. And stress will apply itself to us in ways that cause us not to be the person we would have chosen, but to be the person that was trying to survive in that moment. Or certainly, even though it evolved as survival, for us, it's now just stress. So, billions of years ago, or millions of years ago, I guess, when we had to run from the tiger, that was a response that we didn't really plan, that just run. And this is the same thing. Our brains evolved to keep us alive, to keep us safe, and to keep us doing the most important thing relative to survival in that moment. And unfortunately, we haven't really evolved to a place where we work in collaborative situations where we need to communicate well, build strong relationships. That's relatively new for humans on the evolutionary scale. And so we're still figuring that out. We've got the survival thing down. We know how to prioritize in terms of what's critical. But what we don't know how to do is how to operate in those situations in ways that are still collaborative, are still inclusive, are still engaging for the people that we're working with. And so our brain, so if you look at something as simple as fairness, right? And we look at fairness as a component of employee engagement, and there's 5 of them, but fairness is one of the keys. We actually have a piece of our brain, the insular cortex, which is focused primarily on fairness. And this evolved because as we were moving from singular lifestyles into tribes and groups and communities, fairness was critical. Like, it was a matter of survival. If this tribe didn't share their food well, then we were going to die. And so it was a life or death decision. Is this a fair environment for us? And so we still have filters in our brain that are constantly scanning for, is this a fair environment? Not because I'll die, but because I may or may not want to be there in our current world, right? And because the level of stress associated with being in this environment is too much for me, or doesn't make my life better. So it is sort of a survival thing. And those things still come into play. So yes, the doctor saved the cat, but the way that they yelled at me while they saved the cat, or talked to me or treated me while they saved the cat, wasn't okay. It still wasn't fair, right? And so I start to apply that now to their intentions, where they're bad people, they're mean, they don't care about people, they don't think about others' interests. Do I want to be here, right? And these thoughts start to creep into everybody's head after an event like that, despite the fact that we did the highest priority thing well. We saved the cat, right? And so that's what's really interesting in veterinary medicine, is there is a tremendous amount of inherent stress. Unfortunately, we have to, I say we because I am connected to the profession, but I personally have never euthanized an animal, right? But you have to euthanize animals. You have to deal with those sorts of situations. And so building leadership habits that support our ability to create more engagement, a stronger team of people, even in those environments, is really important. And so one of the things our brain can do is create plans that we can access even in stressful moments. What it can't do is create good plans in stressful moments. And so if you think about things like a fire escape plan, if a family builds one of those, even when the house is on fire, one of the most stressful situations you could, likelihood, if they've built it and practiced it and thought about it and conceived of it and repeated it, then they'll probably be able to execute it in that moment. If they haven't, they don't have a plan for that. They don't have a process for that. They haven't built a neural pathway that they can retrieve. There's nothing in their memory that they can go to. There's only, we got to be creative in this really stressful moment and figure this out. It doesn't work like that. Our brain will cause us to survive before it allows us to create. And we're trying to create in a survival moment. And so we're going to do our most default thing, our habits we've built over time, whatever they are, right, wrong, indifferent. We're going to execute those things. We're going to grab the dog and run, right, rather than, oh, man, we didn't think about the fact that we could have all exited safely this way, right, rather than maybe leaving some important things or kids or pets behind, right? So we need to do that for ourselves so that in those moments we can be great leaders, because we still have to be that if we want the kind of results that people talk about when they think about where they want to work and how they want to work and who they want to work with.
I was just thinking about when my very first day of my internship, it was supposed to be a tour, and there were 6 of us. Right. And we're touring the treatment room. And of course, as soon as we walk in, a patient coded. And one of the technicians screams, "Is there a doctor?" And all but one of the interns, we just were fresh out of school. The one person, he had practiced as an emergency veterinarian for 2 years beforehand. And it was just amazing to watch because subconsciously we all took a step backwards when they said, "Is there a doctor?" Yeah. And he ran over to the table and we all just like looked at each other like, were we supposed to have done that? Were we supposed to have helped? And then, of course, there were 8 other doctors in there. But by the end of the internship, because we had been through that so many times, if something similar happened you don't even know that you're halfway across the room before you're next to the patient if they say that they need CPR. So that's right. Yeah, I think it's very interesting because it's all, we call it muscle memory, but technically if I want to be geeky, it's cerebellar memory, but that's okay.
That's right. It's a neural pathway, and in muscle memory, it is connected to motor neurons. Yeah. But the process of sort of that reflex action is still just something we repeat. It's no different than the neural pathway for brushing our teeth. Right. We could do it in a moment's notice with no practice now, and even do it under stress if we had to, really quickly. And so that's a perfect example of that because he had built habits that allowed him to move into action. You guys hadn't, right? You had to stop and think, wait, am I a doctor? Right. And so it's a reflex. And that's all snapping at someone. That's all dealing with people in tough situations in a way that doesn't feel good for them. That's all that is. It's simply the habits we build. And we don't have to live with the habits we have. We can build new ones. We can't break old ones. They are neural pathways. They're going to be there forever. It's no different than riding a bike or brushing your teeth. We're probably still going to be able to call it back up 10 years from now, even if we didn't do it, or if we did it with the other hand or something. So those things will be with us for life. But we can build new ones because he didn't grow up with the ability to spring into action like that. He built those habits through repetition, and we can do that consciously, not just sort of happen to like the ones that evolved around us because of what we were exposed to.
So let's say you're in a situation where you feel yourself getting heated and you feel yourself getting frustrated with a fellow worker. Yep. And I know, it's not a simple, tell us the secret, but is there one like little beginning step we can use to kind of, because for me, it's like, my husband calls it poking the bear. Like if he knows that I'm getting mad at him, like he'll deliberately, like not literally poke, but he'll deliberately set me off basically, just so I get mad and get over it and move on. Yeah. Because he knows it's easier than it's slowly brewing. Mm-hmm. So if you're in that situation, like, is there one kind of trick that you usually use to get people to take a breath?
Absolutely. So first of all is we have to plan prior to the situation. Intentions under stress don't matter. Only practiced activities or actions do. And so thinking, hey, I want to be better, in that environment next time, or calmer, or more considerate, and still save the cat, right? I want to do both of those things because we don't have to pick one or the other. We can do both. But building a plan as to what we would do and actually walking through that mentally or even physically beforehand is the only way to actually change that behavior. Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll go through the moment and go, oh man, I wanted to do that differently. Oh, darn. It's kind of like a New Year's resolution. I'm going to eat healthier. And halfway through the big pizza, I'm going, oh, darn, I wanted to eat healthier. So it's the same exact thing, right? So what we have to do is plan a process. So when that happens, we can apply a statement or a question or any of those things, right? We can put a statement. Okay, guys, let's be at our best for the next few minutes. This is important. Right? Let's put ourselves aside and dive in and do the right thing for this animal who's with me. We can do things like that are really simple statements that prepare people, right, to do the right thing in that moment without regard for themselves or to even care less about the way that we do it, right? We can also build a plan that says immediately after that, I want to go thank those people. Hey, you were awesome in there. Thanks for the help. Or, hey, I know you just watched there, but I hope there were some things that emerged for you in terms of how you can help in the future. Whatever those things are, right? So we can plan that process. So now I've got somebody that, while they may have been abrupt in a few minutes, they set us up for success at the beginning. They didn't freak out along the way and just yell at people, right? Because look, we have to expect this at some point in veterinary medicine and prepare for how to do it well rather than let it surprise